It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome into another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive, the very first episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive in 2024. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Alan, what's going on?
It's a Steelers afternoon flight for me. I am in Dallas, which is not at all on the way home from Seattle, but, you know, that's how the airlines work sometimes. And so, if you've paid very close attention to the faces in the background here as we're in the terminal at DFW, you may see Ray Fittipaldo and Jerry Dulac and Mike DeFabo. We're all on the same flight coming back here. So, been an interesting couple hours as Mike Tomlin spoke to the media back in Pittsburgh, including Nick Farabaugh, while all of us were on our plane. And so, lots of ground to cover since the last time we talked on Friday, certainly.
Yeah, well, obviously the game happening, but like even more than that, I feel like what kind of is stealing the spotlight from that game is the fact that we know that Mason Rudolph is going to start Week 18 against the Baltimore Ravens, despite the fact that Kenny Pickett should be able to go in that one with where his health was at the end of the week, now where it should be by the time the game. By the way, playing on Saturday again. 4:30 p.m. kick on Saturday, Steelers and Ravens. But Alan, what do we make of this decision with the Steelers to stick by Mason Rudolph, 2-0 with him as the starter, looking for 3-0 in a must-have game if they want any shot at making the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really. It's not what I would do. I think I understand the reasoning. I mean, you've had success with him.
Sure.
You want to reward success. I think he's played well. I don't think he was as good against Seattle as he was against Cincinnati, but the running game was the dominant reason that the Steelers were able to beat the Seahawks. But I thought he played a very competent game, and he's done well enough that the Steelers should feel good about their chances of him being able to go lead them to victory in Baltimore this weekend. Probably not, any differently than they would if they went with Kenny Pickett. But I think I understand the reasons for the decision. I still don't think that you're going anywhere with Mason Rudolph as your starting quarterback beyond whatever happens at the end of the season. And I think you're doing yourself a disservice to 2024 by leaving Kenny Pickett on the bench. But I understand why Mike Tomlin is making the decision that he's making.
I think in the short term, it's exactly, at least for me, the part that you said first there in terms of rewarding the success of the team, not just himself, but also the team when you're 2-0 with him as the starter. Like, I understand there's always going to be the investment that you put into a player that goes into decisions like that, even if you would like to say that there's not going to be, but you would like to think that from a player's perspective, hey, if I feel like I'm doing the right things, why should I have to, then be benched for doing that just because this guy was drafted higher? They hope that he is part of the future. We're in the right now. So I certainly, like you, get it from that perspective. I'm very interested to see how this week plays out now with everything like surrounding the team, all the chatter around it, this decision being made here very early in the week, especially like I didn't even think about that. Like, so many of the media members still on their way back from this game, traveling to this game when this decision was announced. So like, I'm very curious what the chatter around the team is like this week after this decision being made.
Yeah. And I mean, the team's 2-0 with Mason Rudolph. They were 7-2 when Kenny started and finished the game. It's not like they weren't winning with him or that they feel like they can't win with him. I asked 3 guys in the locker room after the game last night, different offensive players, one-on-one, not with cameras around, just me and that guy. What's different about the offense? Is Mason – why are they having success with Mason Rudolph in a way that they did not with Kenny Pickett? Because I think that's a big part of the story, right? I mean, I think Mason Rudolph has been good, but I think the whole offense is playing better, okay? And if those two things are linked, then I think the idea that Mason Rudolph should play, in my mind, becomes much stronger, right? If there's a link between Mason Rudolph playing and the rest of this offense playing, I mean, think back 3-4 weeks ago. I mean, there was this offense was in a bad place. I mean, we had deep, conversations about George Pickens and the selfishness and Deontay Johnson and where things were going. And it seems like a lot of that noise has been quieted. Is that Mason Rudolph? I really didn't get anyone to answer the question. Nobody really said what's different or how it's different. In fact, multiple guys said no. They're the same guy. It's the same. We don't. The difference is that we're playing better. Several guys credited the offensive game planning of Mike Sullivan and Eddie Faulkner and said that it's gotten better. Deontay Johnson said they feel like these last two game plans have been their best two game plans of the season, and that's why they've had so much success. And I, from the outside looking in, kind of agree with that. I think it has been two very different game plans. It's not like they were just spamming success, right? They came up with a way to beat the Bengals and then came up with a completely different way to beat the Seahawks. And I think that's notable. But no one is in the locker room is saying, heck yeah, Mason is the reason that we're being better and I want that guy to start. Now, are they just being polite? Maybe. I don't know. But I found it interesting that was the response that I got to those questions.
Yeah, you look at the surface numbers here for Mason Rudolph, 18 of 24 in this game, 274 yards, 0 touchdowns. More importantly than that, 0 picks, didn't turn the football over. Completion percentage above expected, though, 17.2% over expected, which is their second, obviously, to his game against Cincinnati just a couple weeks ago. And those are the two highest completion percentage above expected games by a Steelers quarterback this season. Also 9 passes targeting outbreaking routes for 149 yards also on here. I just figured I'd mention that because that's on the graphic as well.
They still do love their outbreakers, huh? It doesn't seem like it doesn't matter what changes, right? No Canada, right. No Pickett. It's just the same offense, right? Like they're still going to do that.
One completion over 30 yards, another over 25, and then besides that, a lot of within the 10 to 15 yard range, other than one's kind of right around the line of scrimmage. So, yeah, I mean, not like a ton of deep shots. Obviously, we didn't expect that in this game. Obviously, the George Pickens great catch is the one that was over 30 in this one. But it's interesting to me that you mentioned the offensive game plans, too, because as critical as we've been about, obviously, the quarterback play that we've seen all season, we were very critical of the offensive game plans that were being put together, not just by Matt Canada, but then when the switch was made and we've seen Sullivan and Eddie Faulkner kind of putting this offense together, it hasn't been very good over that losing stretch. So now these last 2 weeks, maybe finding a rhythm and attacking defenses, understanding it's okay, not like the same thing. We have to find different ways to attack different defenses.
Yeah, I want to go back to Rudolph one thing real quick. I wrote last night
on the
site about why he's having success. And I think, not taking into that greater part about the offense that I was talking about before, but just about his quarterback play and why it's been both better than what he did in the past when he got the opportunity to, and when Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky played this year. I feel like he's found the right balance of getting his playmakers and opportunities to make plays. I don't feel like this has been some kind of quarterbacking master class where it's like Patrick Mahomes dragging 5 terrible wide receivers to good numbers, right? Like he's just done enough to let Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, and the rest of his playmakers make him look good. In fact, that was actually a direct quote from Deontay Johnson, is that they feel like they've gotten in position to make plays and they've made them. And I don't think that was happening enough with Kenny Pickett, where he was, I feel like, being too conservative. I don't think he was taking enough chances to get the ball into his playmakers' hands in position to make plays. On the other hand, I felt like Mitch Trubisky was too cavalier with the football, right? He was swung the needle too far the other way, where he was taking too many chances and turning the ball over. I feel like Rudolph has, again, 2 games, but done a really nice job of finding ways. Just give him a chance. And, that pass to George Pickens, thrown off his back foot, it's ugly, flying through the air. It's not particularly well targeted. He just put it in a spot where George had the chance to make a good play, and he did. And I think, that's not to say that it's been oh my God, he's just been so good, but it's certainly been good in a different way compared to what the Steelers had before in terms of the ability to give those guys a chance to make a play. And I don't think that's, I did feel like Mike Tomlin was more aggressive in this game, from the very beginning, going for it on 4th down on the first drive. Yeah. I don't know if that aggressiveness is part of an overall shift in mindset of the offense, of the team, to say, hey, we just got to find a way to do this, or if this is a difference between the individuals, right? It's, it gets hard to separate the variables here. And we also only have, 5.5 quarters of Kenny Pickett with Eddie Sullivan Eddie Faulkner and Mike Sullivan. And one of those games was their first game on the job. So, yeah, I think it's hard to separate all these things and really find meaningful analysis to do. It's just a lot of there's very small samples. We don't really know what's causing a lot of this stuff, other than, and I think that's maybe the best argument for, well, okay, the only thing there is to do is to keep playing to find out, right? You're never going to know unless you keep rolling the ball out there. Now, they only have one more game guaranteed, but the more that Mason Rudolph plays and the more that Kenny Pickett plays, either way, really, we will continue to learn about why what's happened has happened and what are the root, sort of inputs that are leading the Steelers to where they are. Just for me, and I'm reiterating what I said before, the big difference is if you get good play out of Kenny Pickett, it solves problems in a way that it does not solve if you get good play out of Mason Rudolph. About the scheme, though, man, this was a great game plan. Really, from the very beginning, came out in 3 tight ends under center. They announced to the world that they were going to run the ball. They still found a way to do it. And a completely different way to attack the Seattle team than the game plan they unraveled last week, which and we talked about on this show. I was very complimentary to it. I thought they did an awesome job of outfoxing the Bengals. And this time it was more about out executing than I think it was necessarily fooling Seattle. They didn't really fool anybody. They pretty much announced what they were going to do on every play, and then they went ahead and found a way to do it anyway. Big credit to the offensive line and their play, which I think was by far their best game. But I just think a lot of credit to Sullivan and Faulkner for realizing that you need to have multiple ways to win. For an offense that has been very stagnant all season, I think it would be very easy to have success with one game plan like they did against Cincinnati and really latch on to that and not want to let it go.
Yeah.
Right. Like, oh, this worked. Let's do it again. And I give them a lot of credit for really from the very beginning of the game, again, okay, that worked last week. We're doing something else this week anyway. And that something else worked really well.
And the other part of it is execution, right? I mean, the offensive line, like you just mentioned, thought they had their best day. George Pickens was very good. Mason was good. The running backs, Najee Harris in particular, I know that it wasn't his, most yards above expected he's had in his career. I don't know if I've ever been more impressed watching him run, though, than I was yesterday.
94% of his yards were after contact.
Yeah.
And it was violent contact, and it was violent contact initiated by him.
He had another one of those dribble stiff arms where he's dribbling.
So did Warren.
And it was Rick Woolen.
And Warren did it to Quandre Diggs. Like, these are not bad players. These are good players. I felt like that was the game that really, to me, showed the value of having 2 good running backs. I'm not sure that you get that game if you're playing either one of those guys and running the ball that much with either one of them. I think the 1-2 punch and the ability for Warren to be a little bit more explosive, but Harris to be, that real power runner that makes you stack the box, that makes you adjust as a defense and get the tough yards and keep the offense on schedule. I really thought it showed the reason why 2 running backs are better than 1. And, I think the fan base has kind of been caught up in one or the other there. And I think really the right answer has been both. I think they could have done a better job over the course of the season in the way that they've deployed them. But this was a game where you really had both guys on. And that's really why I think the run game played as well as it did, is that you've got good blocking up front. And then you finally had a game where both running backs were really fielding it. We remember that Cleveland game, right, where it was like they ran the ball okay, but it was all Warren. And Harris, didn't really hold up his end of the bargain. And we've had some other games that were the other way. But this one was really the first time where I felt like it didn't matter who they handed the ball off to. They were going to have success with it. And when you have that, man, I think it's really a force multiplier for the position. And I think that's why a lot of teams want to have 2 running backs. And I think the Steelers really showed their potential at that position. If they can keep blocking like that, man, those guys were really something.
Yeah, Najee, 27 carries, 122 yards. 2 rushing touchdowns. Jaylen Warren, 13 carries, 75 yards, and a touchdown as well. And this was the matchup we were concerned about, right? Like, were the Steelers going to be able to get the ball rolling on the ground to be able to open things up for the passing game? Seattle's run defense, like on the surface, the numbers aren't there, but they've been a lot better over the last month or so in terms of limiting that. Similarly to the Steelers, the way that the season has trended for their rush defense and continuing to get better as the season goes on. And they really clamped down in the red zone, but the Steelers found a way to even finish off some drives in the red zone, obviously putting up 30 points again.
Yeah, I mean, and on the ground again, right? I mean, Najee from the 4, Najee from the 9, Jaylen 1 from the 18. That's that's big time. That's the way you have to beat the Seahawks, because the way they're so aggressive on the outside, when space shrinks, like, you're not going to get free guys in the end zone against players like Witherspoon and Woolen and Diggs. Like, those are quality guys. Like, you have to find a way to do what the Steelers did to them. And I think that's, again, a huge credit to Sullivan and Faulkner, a huge credit to the offensive line. Man, how many games would have gone completely different if the Steelers had gotten that performance out of that offensive line more than once this year? I mean, it was – the pass protection was very good too. Like, Mason Rudolph was – he was under pressure some, but he wasn't running for his life. He was standing in the pocket, and it was there.
Yeah, there were a couple ugly Mason Cole snaps, as per the usual. But, like, other than that, I mean, I not even noticeable from him in terms of missed assignments or any issues with blocking.
How about the game from Broderick Jones too? I thought he was a bully, man. When things got going forward in the running game, a couple pancakes. Dan Moore really silenced Boye Mafe. I don't even remember hearing his name called.
I know. And that's a matchup I think that we were kind of worried about.
That was a really strong performance of the offensive line. One that if you feel like if you'd gotten more of those over the course of the year, man, they would not be sweating things in week 18.
Which for Broderick was very encouraging, because things had really started to trend in the wrong direction lately. So, maybe have that arrow pointing back up after this performance, and hopefully he can stack another one against Baltimore.
He didn't have as tough of a matchup in pass protection as he has had, or as he will this coming week. But, man, the run game was a difference maker, and I thought he was good enough in pass pro. And Moore, I thought, really stepped up his game. And the guards have been good most of the year, but they were excellent. Dan Moore it was like a 4 or 5 yard gain from Harris at the middle. Moore had 2 guys. He's blocking one with his left hand, one with his right hand, driving him forward. I'm like, where has this guy been all year? Like, this is impressive stuff. This is a guy that everybody wanted to have on the bench. And I'm not saying that people are wrong to say that, because he had not been playing well. And then all of a sudden he comes out with this kind of game. It's a difference maker.
Sure. Was there anything else offensively that you wanted to touch on before we switch to the other side of the ball?
No, I don't think I think we hit all the big talking points. The one thing that I'm curious about, and that I'm going to write about today, is I don't really understand why Kenny Pickett didn't dress in this game. And Mike Tomlin has done nothing to explain it. And there's now been chatter that Kenny refused to play as a backup. And I think that's – I can't confirm that. I've not heard that from not even one person. I've reached out to Pickett's agent, and he has not gotten back to me. That would generally be the person that I would think would want to say so if it wasn't true. So it doesn't make any sense from a team perspective to not make him the third quarterback. There's literally no downside to it. You don't get to dress another player instead of the third quarterback. Mike Tomlin's explanation made 0 sense. He said, because he didn't play, I didn't think it was a good idea. I'm like, what? Do you think Connor Hayward playing quarterback is a better idea if you get to that point? Like come on.
Right.
Like, that's just stupid. So the only real options that make any sense are that Pickett didn't want to, or he is being punished for something by the team, right? I mean, that's all I can come up with that really makes any sense to me. And so obviously I understand, given either of those potential options, why they're being cagey about it, but something definitely doesn't add up there. And, man, like, can you imagine what had happened if, like, even for 1 or 2 plays that the Steelers were down to their third quarterback? Kenny Pickett was not dressed for that game. was not able to go in. They had to run some plays with a non-quarterback at quarterback, and then it comes out later that he was healthy enough to play. Like, come on, man. Like, something not right there. And, I have not seen anything from any of the way that the Steelers have handled this process that makes me feel like they are out on Kenny Pickett's future. But him refusing to dress as a backup would feel like one of those things to me.
I agree. And, I was very confused yesterday. And I was like, maybe once Tomlin speaks, we'll get a little bit more clarity on it. No, I'm way more confused today than I was yesterday now.
No, he said the same thing twice, so at least he's consistent. It just doesn't make any sense what he's saying. There's no amount of reps that he could take or not take that would convince me that a medically cleared Kenny Pickett would not, at the very worst, be the third option for the team to play a quarterback. Like that, there's just no chance that anything else could possibly be true. And so, obviously, the answer we got was a lie. I don't know what the truth is. I'm trying to find out, but I think what has been said is certainly a plausible answer to that question.
Yeah.
And I think if it's true, it brings up real questions about how you move forward now.
And that's why that right there, I didn't know if we were going to talk about that at all in this episode, is why I mentioned I'm so intrigued by the way that this week is going to play out. Like, there's more come out about this at some point throughout the week that gets discussed and somebody has to answer on.
Feel like we're destined for another week of quarterback talk here, Smitty. No matter how much we tried to avoid it. But look, I mean, if he refused to dress as a backup, then that means that the next thing we're going to hear from Kenny Pickett is a trade request. I mean, there's no going back from that. Like, you can't just tell the team that you're not going to play and then like, that doesn't work. It's not a part of this process. So, I mean, that's where we're headed if that's true.
We've maybe more so jokingly talked about the idea of what his trade value would be, but what if we actually get to that point and we were just ahead of the game?
I mean, if it's him demanding the trade, I don't know that there's much of any, because then the Steelers don't have a lot of leverage. I mean, I don't know. I thought it was kind of pie in the sky before for different reasons because I didn't think the Steelers would want to. Now I think it's kind of pie in the sky because that guy demanding a trade is going to be worth what exactly? I don't know. Maybe you get something for him, but it's not going to be some kind of impressive haul because the leverage is going to be minimal if you have a disgruntled player who's refusing to play on your roster.
Yeah, absolutely. Alan, the matchup that kind of we all had circled and players in this matchup did as well. Joey Porter Jr. versus DK Metcalf. We got a lot of it in this game. How did you think it went from both sides?
Well, Joey got his first real butt whipping at the NFL level. I thought DK Metcalf was open most of the game, and I thought that Seattle didn't do enough of a job of making him a winning factor for them because I feel like he could have been. Joey will learn, and DK is really good, but I thought that was the one part of the game that you could sort of demonstratively say tilted towards Seattle.
Yeah. So from Next Gen Stats, Joey Porter Jr. lined across from DK Metcalf on 26 of the 32 routes. His 6-time shadow coverage game since week 7. Metcalf caught 3 of the 6 targets for 86 yards. The first wide receiver to gain over 40 yards versus Porter in coverage this season.
Now, I will say this: that's a tough matchup. A lot of teams are not going to put a cornerback one-on-one against DK Metcalf all game and be like, do your best. However, did we hear Tyler Lockett's name called once?
There was that one that he got popped on that kind of came out of his hands. I don't recall a whole lot other than he had 1 catch for 10 yards.
So I think the Steelers and Smith and Jigba 1 catch.
1 for 12. Yeah, it was touchdown. But
the touchdown, but the play that Porter's not in the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's very clear to me that, well, yes, Joey kind of got cooked a couple times. The Steelers were giving him a knowingly difficult assignment and taking care of business everywhere else, and they did that. And that's why I felt like Seattle didn't do a good enough job of recognizing what was happening and doing more to get the ball to Metcalf as a result of it, because the other guys weren't that open. The Steelers were doing a good job of taking the other 2 receivers away. That is it. We talked about, but that is a talented group of receivers. It is hard to take all 3 of them away. The Steelers did a pretty good job on 2 of the 3 and left Joey with a tough assignment. And I don't say he won it, but he said he did enough for the team to win, and I think that's he gets credit for that. But it's that's a difficult job. There's not too many corners that you're just be like, go take care of DK Metcalf, and they're like, no problem, got it, boss. Anything else you need me to do on the way? Like, come on, like
Well,
that's
sure. And how
that's not
different
the,
is
not the
that?
way the
How
league
different?
works.
How different is this if Minka Fitzpatrick is available? To help
Yeah,
him out.
right.
Like,
Probably very different, right? You don't feel like you need to expend so many resources on guarding those other guys where maybe you could give Joey some help every once in a while and keep things a little bit more, reasonable. Also, it gives you the option of playing Patrick Peterson against Metcalf and not making Porter take every single rep against a big physical guy who will wear you down over the course of the game. He is, even though Joey's a big corner, he's the smaller of those two players. No
sure.
question.
Yeah, you like see in the run game when he was getting his hands on him and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah,
he'll beat
like
you up too.
just the idea of giving Porter 2 plays off would have been beneficial, but they really had. I mean, James
Hmm.
Pierre was the depth. I mean, that's not the matchup you want
Right.
either.
I feel like that kind of flew under the radar. Lockett and Smith and Jigba only having combined 2 catches in this game. I mean, obviously the execution has to be in there, but we gave a ton of credit to the offensive game plan. How much credit should Terrell Austin get for what the Steelers were able to do defensively against the Seahawks team?
Well, I don't know. I felt like they really did a good job of not letting big plays get to them. They gave up big plays to
They did.
Metcalf and to Fant and Gino running and Kenneth Walker. But they did a pretty good job of minimizing the impact. They held them to field goals in the second half. They didn't have those like big, bold 3-and-outs that did on the first drive, and then I think that was the last one. But they were
Mhm.
just able to do enough on a game where your offense is running the ball so well. You feel good about winning the time of possession game. You feel good about winning the field position game. If you can get field goals, you can win those games. So it wasn't like a dominant defensive performance, but I felt like, given the personnel, they did a good enough job. And, there's still obviously a lot to clean up from what happened on defense. But I just think so much of it is how much can you do with the guys that are left?
And to your point about the Metcalf thing, and then I'll tie in this too. Maybe it was more of the Seahawks doing them a favor with what they were doing offensively. I mean, only 12 combined carries between Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet.
Yeah, Walker got banged up. He missed a bunch of time in the second half, and I'm not sure he was 100% when he came back. The other thing I felt like the Steelers didn't really blitz Geno Smith very much at all. They just ran 4 rushers, and I felt like that got a little predictable by the end of the game, where Smith was really pretty confident in where the rush was coming from, and that he was able to like when you have a rookie quarterback in there, like sometimes 4 guys can still fool him. Geno Smith's not going to be fooled. Like he knows where the 4 guys are coming from. He knows how to make his adjustments to get the guys he needs to in the right spot to block them, to make sure that he can throw the ball he wants to throw. And I thought he did a good job of that. I didn't think the Steelers really attacked him enough. But again, if you're going to blitz, you're going to leave yourself short on the back end somewhere. And I just felt like it was almost like a very conservative defensive game plan that worked, but only barely.
If there's something else you wanted to touch on, we definitely can. But I wanted to bring up one guy for sure who made a massive play in this game, has made the most of his opportunities. Nick Herbig. So they still only win this game by 1 possession, but that to me, when that happened, I was like, okay, that's ball game off of that fumble recovery, strip sack fumble recovery. How have you felt like they've kind of brought him along? Obviously, the opportunities aren't going to be aplenty when you're talking about playing behind T.J. Watt now. It's Highsmith, but just like I said, every time he's on the field, he seems to make a play.
Yeah, I thought that honestly, like I didn't think Watt and Highsmith were very good in this game compared to how good they can be. TJ was complaining about getting held a lot. I saw at least one that definitely was that they got hurt on. But I felt like
Yeah.
they were not really able to make their usual amount of impact. Maybe that was the lack of blitzing or whatever, but I was having that thought throughout the game. And then Herbig comes in and does that on one of his very few snaps. And I feel like at that point, that thought's confirmed, right? That, like, maybe that wasn't a great game from 1956. If Herbig was able to come in such a limited playing time, make that kind of impact. I knew at halftime in a game with no turnovers, the first one was going to be big, right? It had been back and forth. Still didn't punt until almost the fourth quarter. It was just like drive, back and forth. And you knew that the first turnover was going to be a huge play in the game, and it was. And like you said, completely changed the complexion of the whole rest of the game after that. It went from a game the Steelers were kind of holding on to, a game that they were really in full control of.
And to your point, though, about Watt and Highsmith, how about this? Even the other guy, Marcus Golden, 6 pass rush reps, 3 QB hits in this one. So, he was getting there.
Yes, although one of his QB hits was on the play that Herbig got the sack, I think. So,
how
that works.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a good game from Golden, and I didn't think that the other two guys were at their best. Especially also considering it was a pretty beat up Seattle offensive line, right? They came in missing one guy. They lose Abe Lucas during the game. They lost center Evan Brown during the game, so they were down 3 starters on that Seattle offensive line. Where it felt like Geno Smith did a good job of getting rid of the ball, but I feel like I have higher expectations for the Steelers edge rushers than what they brought to the table. I thought they did an okay job with Walker, especially in the second half.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Alan, anything else?
No, I don't have anything else. I'll get back home tonight, and we'll do this again tomorrow on a Tuesday that's a Wednesday now, because apparently Sunday games are like just a rare luxury that we are only able to be afforded once or twice a season. We just everything but.
Yeah. Hey, the Steelers have wins on 4 different days of the week this year. That's pretty cool to be able to say.
They are 1-1 on Saturday, so this is the tiebreaker in
rubber match.
Days.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, Alan, tell the people where they can find you, other than
at A. Saunders, Dallas Airport. So if you would like to welcome me to Pittsburgh, that would be fine. Although I may get there before this fully airs. A Saunders _PGH on Twitter, PGH Steelers Now, SteelersNow.com, and that's it.
There we go. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell here. Hit us in the comments, anything that we talked about, anything you would like to hear us talk about on the next episode. Leave us a 5-star review if you're listening somewhere else. I'm Zachary Smith, PGH, for Alan Saunders and myself. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Until then, thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.